Hey guys, welcome to another YouTube video. This time I thought I would do something different and go over some of the hands that I played recently. And the main objective is not necessarily to see, okay, should I bluff catch the spot or not, but to learn something new and to have a better understanding of how we should construct our range. And let's get right into the action. So the first hand that I show you was played on 2K, and we have the 6-4 suited in the small blind. A regular opens, and we defend. He checks to us, which I assume he would do with his entire range, as this board is really good for us. And I have my first decision point in the hand. I can now either stab, which I think I should do most of the time, or go for a check back. In game I thought top 2 would stab always, and then I can check back 6-3 suited. And sets and straights I would have also always stabbed. So anyway, we go for the stab. This is the sizing that they use here, 75. You could also stab smaller. There are a lot of different strategies available. He does decide to call, which I think he certainly could have some check raises as he checks his range. So it's not like he has to play super passive. And now we get the deuce and spades turn, which it evens things out a little bit, because both players have a number of flushes in the range. And I thought I wanted to decrease my sizing so that I could still bet a hand like a straight or 6-4 and also flushes, like to have a little bit more of a merged range on the turn basically. And I figured when I bet half pots, a hand like 6-4 is probably a mix and mainly a check, I assume. But I thought it's important to have those sort of hands in, to be able to have full houses on the river. I mean, of course I have my sets, but yeah, to increase to strengthen my range on the river pairs. And I go for the half pot c-bet, and out of position decides to raise. So this is a very ugly spot, of course, as he is not really raising a worse hand. And in game I thought if I have a straight, I would always bet fold, so straight without the draw, like let's say check 5 in hearts, because that hand is basically drawing that versus his value range, and he already says he has me beat. A hand like 6-4 is also beat, but at least it can improve, so I figured I never can bet fold. I said I don't think I can bet fold 2 pair, and that's why I decided to click call. And on the queen river, he decides to jam it in, and now you're of course in a very ugly spot with a bluff catcher. But as already mentioned, I don't want to spend too much time going into detail about the river bluff catcher spot, as it will be very player dependent. And I figure in solo land my hand is probably mainly a fold, as I don't have a spade, but it wouldn't be a disastrous call and it would never be a good call. It would be close to 0v because he says he has a better hand than us, and we have a different bluff catch spot for the most part. So I brought up the solution to this spot, and let's take a look. Now, as already suspected, out of position should check most of his range, even if he only has the 25% c-bet sizing as an option. And this is the strategy from in position when you give it the option to bet 75 or check, which is my preferred strategy on this type of boards. And we can see that we bet quite often, but we still need to do a lot of checking with weaker top pairs and also 2 pairs. So that's like the first thing that comes to mind is I overestimated how often my hand can bet. I thought top 2 I wouldn't have been surprised if it would have always stabbed and then check back 6-3 more often. But it is checking without backdoor flush draw over 40% of the time, so that's quite significant. Even sets are sometimes checking, but I think I wouldn't do that versus most players unless I see them taking the line overbet turn jam river. And I think the worst thing that happens versus most breaks is 150, and for that I don't think you need to check back sets. But anyway, we decided to stab, and here we see how he should respond. And he has to do a lot of folding with hands like king queen with a heart, king jack with a heart already, which is maybe not that intuitive, as you have 2 overcards and a backdoor flush draw. But the board is just pretty unfavorable, and I bet big already. Also, I think people miss the raises here. They think, oh, the board is really bad for me, so I have to play passive. But you already checked range, so you already recognize the fact that the board is bad, and now you don't want to get into the trap where you say, okay, I check back again, I play too passive and I don't raise again, and we see a lot of thin raises like king 6, even ace 4, ace 3 that are just quite mergy. But he decided to call. And on the turn, okay, did not think that he would have a donking strategy, so that's already interesting. Probably meaning, okay, he calls the big bet on the flop, and now the turn brings a flush, which evens things out, and he can't have air. We can still see bet hand like queen 10 off without the heart. So that's, I think, why he could have a donk range here. I don't think people find those in games though. And versus the check, we can see that we have a strategy where we can bet half pot or 75. Bigger sizing is not really an option here because, as we said already, both players just have too much nuts in the range. And I'm going to resolve this for the 50% sizing, but let's look quick at how I should respond. So already when we split range, he shouldn't really have too much raises. Only 6%. And it's already, you can already see your player depend on this. Some players might be pretty spewy and they raise their one heart combos way more often. Other players might never raise the spot. So it's already very tough to estimate how ranges look in game. But if we create a sub configuration, which is something that I would encourage you to do, just because it gives you a more clearer idea of how your strategy should look like, as you should only simplify to one sizing in this spot, in my opinion. Oh, I messed up. I gave out position the donk. My bad. So here we go. And we can see when we bet half pot, we can still value bet some straights. But most of the time you check them back, which makes sense because they can only get one more straight to value. They can't improve, and yeah, if you get raised, it really sucks. And you can also see that 6-4 is actually never a bet on the turn, which was a mistake that I made. It is enough to just bet your sets. Sets basically always bet, but 2 pair checks, and why is that? We can see it's just not a good result. He folds check 6, queen 6, king 6, he even starts folding pocket 10s without the heart, pocket 9s. So we're folding out hands that we are doing really well against, and he continues with hands that have good equity with a flush draw or something. So it's not a good strategy to bet my hand on the turn. So that is already noted. Also pretty cool is those showdown value bluffs with the 2-6, where you exploit the fact that he calls ace queen with a heart, but folds pocket 10s and 6x. So that's pretty cool to find those hands. And yeah, now I face the raise, so now we are already in a spot of the game tree where that shouldn't happen very often. But we can see we bet fold our 2 pair, and we always call our sets. Unfortunately, we won't know what 6-4 would do because we never should have it. So yeah, then on the river you could also look at it, but it's pretty much whatever. I don't really care about the river decision too much. But I thought flop and turn was quite interesting. So that was the first hand that I played. So now let's look at the second hand. I have ace 9. And it's again a blind v blind spot. This time we are playing as the small blind at 1K. And we get the flop where it's pretty much the opposite of the last time where we had to range check. This time we can range bet the flop. It's really good for the small blind. And in position has to continue quite wide, of course, versus the small sizing. And on the 4th turn, I thought that it's a pretty good spot to bet depolarized again, to not say, okay, I have a strong ace or nothing, but to still value bet 6x, under pairs, 7s, 8s, to still bet a very wide merged range. And I think will present a lot of trouble for imposition to continue wide enough. He does raise, which is a play that should of course happen sometimes, but it's a little bit tricky, because if he would know that I would only play blocks, I don't think he would have many raises. But if he thinks I split my range and I'm just face up or weaker when I bet the small sizing, then it's of course important to find raises, so kind of a tricky spot. Anyway, we have a pretty clear call, of course. And on the flush river, he decides to bet half pot. And I remember thinking again, man, I never win here. But I know in theory this is just such a clear call with the 9 spade as well. And the sizing is also giving me a great price. And he basically wraps a hand like ace jack, I think here, or a weak flush. I'm not even sure if he should value bet, if he can even value bet ace jack anymore. But again, if he thinks my turn betting range is too weak, then why not, right? So yeah, you are in a bluff catch spot. I think this is a premium bluff catcher. So in theory, I wind up calling because I thought it would just be a bit too extreme to fold this. But I figured this is probably a spot where I'm not good a lot. And he did show up with the ace jack without a spade, and I figured I wanted to look at the turn strategy both for me and him, see how he should construct his raising range, what hands he also should still call against. And then on the river, I was also interested what sizings he should pick, and if he can still value bet the hand like ace jack. So I also brought up this sim. Okay, so we can see that contrary to the last board, this time we have a range bet, and on the turn the solver also likes to use the small sizing, which we implemented in game, and we will look at the split, and then we could still resolve. So when we split, I would imagine he has to find some raises, which he does. And given that we see bet condensed range on the turn, he shouldn't raise too polarized. He has hands like pocket sevens, king six, which raise just as often, if not more often, than hand like ace jack or ace 10. And versus his raise, I would assume I need to find some free bets if I have a hand like ace king, ace queen, because we want to avoid him checking back those sort of hands. And yeah, you can see it's not a big part of our strategy, of course, because our range is so wide, but we find some free bets versus his raise. And what should be his bluffs? And like 8-7 comes to mind with his spade. Interesting. 7-5 only. I thought this would be maybe one of his main bluff raises, but it's mainly calls. Some flush draws, and yeah, all sort of hands getting in there. Also interesting to note, and I think this is a spot where most players mess up. He does have to defend really right. Of course he has to call every pair. He has to call a ton of king x, which I think most good players find. But how many players find the queen 10 in diamonds call, the queen 9 in diamonds call, to just float the turn to be able to bluff the river? And I don't think a lot of players find those hands. I assume the diamonds hands calls because it doesn't block bluffs. Diamonds are our worst turn bluffs because it blocks impositions folds. So queen 10 in diamonds is a way nicer float than a hand like queen 10 in hearts, because it doesn't block our air hands, which we will give up. But yeah, I thought the turn strategy is pretty interesting for what he has to call and how I should construct his raising range. As played, we had, what was the river again? The 3 in spades. And interestingly, he only bet small. I would not have known that. I wouldn't have been surprised if he should only bet 150%, as I thought he would only want to value bet flushes at this point. But apparently, flushes don't want to go this big. It seems like flushes are just very content on this paired board to just value bet 75. So I would have overestimated a flush here as imposition. And you are not really value betting ace-6 anymore. To be fair, in this sim I don't have the 50% sizing just yet. So if you added a 50% sizing, maybe a hand like ace jack would get in there, but then it's probably also, is it worth it to value bet ace jack if it's the only hand you put in that sizing? It's a little bit questionable. And versus the bets, this is the 75% bet, of course. We see we mainly call our ace-x, but we are not really making money if we don't have a spade. With a spade, in theory, we have a printing call with winning three big blinds, which is of course a lot. In reality, I'm still not convinced if it's a great call. But yeah, I think as a default, calling the hands that are absolute printing bluff catchers in theory, and then always folding those under pairs, folding ace-x without a spade, I think is fine. That way you make sure you don't get completely run over if it does overbluff the spot somehow, and you still fold a bit too much, which I think is not too bad. So anyway, those were the two hands that I wanted to show to you. And yeah, if you like that sort of format, please leave a comment, and see you in the next one. Bye.